Good, I can sleep through it. Yeah, I was just talking at the break about the history of photography course that's being offered next semester, which is going to be amazing, and it's on Thursday afternoons. But the photography department has a kind of co-course that you can take Friday mornings, and it's 1.5 credits, and you only have to go to 5 labs. And so what it is, it's a hands-on course. So when the instructor is teaching the art history side of it, then you'll go to the lab and you'll apply the historical techniques to photographic processes and stuff. So if you're an artist, it would be amazing. Like you'd be sort of learning the art historical stuff, but doing it hands-on. And I'd like to take it. I think it'd be really fun. So the photo course is called Photo 1150. And yeah, so if you're thinking of taking the critical history of photography, think about taking the accompanying lab. I think it'd be really good. And because it's only 1.5 credits, it's way cheaper too than a regular course. And it says, somebody said it says it's restricted, but it's not. So just ignore that. I think in the future, they're gonna, when they offer it just to the photography students, it'll be partially restricted till they fill up, and then it'll be open. But now it's open to anybody. Any questions? Okay, symbolism. So we were looking at the work of Gustave Moreau, which focuses on grand themes that have occupied humanity over the centuries: life, death, desire, and the divine. But this artist, Odilon Redon, creates an imagery that's a lot more personal. It's rooted in the imagination's world of dream and nightmare. And his work is really interesting, and it's a major precursor to the surrealists like Salvador Dali and so on. And this is called In the Dream, Vision. And it's one of the plates or prints of a 10-part series. So what Redon does is he takes things that we're all familiar with, things that are available to us that we see in the rational waking world. But he puts them together in irrational ways, in ways that we might put them together in dreams, where our conscious thought isn't intervening and making things rational and normal, where things just kind of collide. And that's exactly what happens here. And so it creates these kind of experiences that make us think about ideas beyond just what's in the real world, and think about symbolic and elements of the imagination and dreams. So we've got here these two figures who are walking into the picture frame. And she's kind of looking back, and he's kind of looking over here. So a lot of it is about the dynamics of looking. It's a bit of a dialogue on that. We're looking at them, not looking at either us or the strange eyeball that's floating up in the sky. We see columns. We're familiar with columns, the checkerboard floor. But then there's this eye that's just kind of hovering, and it seems very mysterious and strange. And the way he makes the print very murky, it seems also kind of a bit nightmarish at the same time. And there's so many ways in which we can think of the eyeball. I mean, is it the eye of God, or is it an eye that's looking up at God? But the bottom line is it creates a kind of strange feeling within. There's something disturbing but intriguing at the same time. And again, let me read you what he says about his symbolist style. He calls it suggestive art. Suggestive art is like an illumination of things for dreams, toward which thought also is directed. Decadence or not, it is so. let us say rather that it is growth, the evolution of art for the supreme elevation and expansion of our personal life through a necessary exaltation, our highest point of strength or moral support. So there's that idea with Redon and the other symbolists that the artist's role is not simply to see things, but to see through them to a reality or a significance that's more profound than what is suggested by external appearance. So it's almost like the artist is a kind of prophet or seer. He goes on to say, this suggestive art lies completely within the exciting realm of the art of music, and more freely and radiantly. It is also my own art through a combination of various elements brought together, of forms that are transposed and transformed without any relation to the contingencies at hand, but which nevertheless possess a logic all their own. All the errors made by critics concerning my first works were the result of their inability to see that it is not at all necessary to define, to understand, to limit, to be precise, because everything that is sincerely and humbly new, such as the beautiful from elsewhere, carries its meaning within itself. So again, it's almost about this sort of pure imagination, letting the imagination move. This is another work. It's a charcoal drawing by Redon, and it's simply called The Convent. So, on one level, we kind of get it. It looks like somebody's in a cell with bars on the window. But it's also very strange. It's not like a person that we would see in normal waking life. And in fact, he was inspired by a Maori mummy, like a mummified person that he saw in a museum. And he, again, gives us this very murky treatment of the paper. And the figure kind of looks at us. It's very strange. It seems rational, and at the same time it's irrational. And what's really disturbing is the fact that the mummy is kind of looking at us and pointing. So again, it conjures these strange feelings within. Redon is a very interesting figure. So this movement of symbolism inspires a lot of different groups, a lot of different symbolist cults. And many of them take inspiration from Gauguin. One of these is the Nabi. The Hebrew word is Nabi. The English word is prophet. So again, there's that sort of prophetic idea that the artist has a kind of elevated perception of the world. And part of this conception is the idea of the artist as an elitist in contrast to the materialism, the conventional values of the modern industrial middle-class society. And it's a rejection of the concept of utilitarianism for the concept of the aesthetic. And so a lot of this, and this is true with the Nabi, is really focusing on the resonance of color. So they use color arbitrarily and straight from the tube, not matching it with nature. And the intention is that the painting should be a visual harmony of color, line, and form, which in turn will conjure a feeling or a sensation. And this is where the artist's life is made visible. So two of the artists who were associated with the Nabi, Edward Vuillard and Paul Bonnard, and Pierre Bonnard, this is a work by Vuillard called Woman in Blue with Child. And both of these artists deal with interior scenes, but not just a kind of representation, a literal representation of the interior. It is designed to make us sort of feel in a certain way. And we look at this, and we can kind of make it out. It is the colors outright straight out of the tube, and we have these great broad sections of flat pattern and so on. But it suggests the form of a woman and a baby. So there's this kind of intimate thing going on here, but it's not really totally self-explanatory. So there's something a bit strange in how it feels. And also, this cacophony, this huge grouping of colors and patterns makes it almost claustrophobic in feeling. We just feel like we're being kind of hemmed in by all of this color and pattern. And so again, it shows something literally, but it inspires a different kind of feeling. This is by Bonnard, and this is, I think it makes it even a little bit more clear about what they're doing. It's simply called Man and Woman. And on one level, it's just a representation of a man and a woman in a bedroom. But there's something else going on here. You can see that on the right-hand side, the man is in sort of darkness, and there's a screen of some kind that's sort of folded up that's separating them. The woman is bathed in light. And it seems as if we are being given the opportunity to peek into a very private moment. And they seem to be having an argument. There's something psychological going on here. There's a sense of anxiety. Have they had a fight? Have they been unsuccessful in the sex act? Like, we don't know, but we just sense there's a resonating feeling about what's going on here. And it's all a product of the composition, the light, the color, very harsh colors as well, and then these harsh, dark elements too. So very, very interesting avenues that these symbolist artists are going down. Now, you notice we haven't looked at sculpture in like forever, and that's because generally sculpture is fairly conservative during the 19th century, with all of these movements going on, where you see painting movements becoming avant-garde and then becoming conservative. You know, the Impressionists are criticized only for the first several years of their existence, and then they're totally accepted, and then a new style becomes the one that is innovative and avant-garde. But with sculpture, because the materials are so expensive, and because they are generally commissions that are public commissions, artists are not given a lot of leeway to be experimental, and so they remain usually pretty conservative. Auguste Rodin is the exception. He is an artist who becomes very innovative and is subjected to a lot of criticism because of it. And I'll show you, this is the one in your book. This is called The Age of Bronze, and he was deeply criticized because the figure is not idealized. In fact, he used as a model an actual French soldier, I believe. And so a lot of people accused him of taking molds of the man's body. Well, he didn't, but he wasn't following the sort of conventional neoclassical type of sculpture or romantic. It was something that was more realist. This is what people were used to, you know, this kind of either neoclassical or romantic by Francois Rude. So when Rodin was commissioned to do this sculpture of John the Baptist, he decided to do a number of different studies, which is not uncommon. I mean, Michelangelo did studies and so on. He did these maquettes. And one of them was this. And it's just a kind of fleshing out of the torso of the figure, the legs. It has no head and no arms. And he looked at it and he thought, it's absolutely beautiful in its own right. And so he simply cast it and finished it and called it Walking Man. And what this did was it really opened things up for sculptors to be able to do things that were very innovative. Now, what makes this different from previous sculpture is that there's nothing narrative about it. It's completely self-referential. And in other words, when you think of previous sculptures, there's always something that identifies them as something outside of themselves. So Michelangelo's David he's holding a rock and a sling. And so you know he's the biblical figure who slays the giant Goliath with a sling and a stone. John the Baptist also has attributes, and with a head you could identify his long scraggly hair, and that makes him John the Baptist. But when you remove the face and the arms and you leave it at the level of pure form, it's totally self-referential. And so it's just a kind of aesthetically beautiful work of art, or aesthetically interesting. It's about form as opposed to content. It doesn't have a subject matter. And that's what makes this tremendously modern. And you can see it's unfinished at will. It's almost like an impressionistic treatment of the bronze, where you've got these large kind of furrows in it, and the emphasis is on how the light reflects off of the material, which is what the Impressionists were doing with their short, choppy brushstrokes. So what Rodin did is in his works, this one is Walking Man, he did another one called Torso, is he opened the way for the 20th century for artists like this. This is Umberto Boccioni's work from the first couple decades of the 20th century, called Unique Forms of Continuity in Space. And so it's simply an exercise in the representation of form in space, and the idea of forms of continuity, playing with the idea of presenting the illusion of movement. But it doesn't refer to anything outside of itself. It's unique forms of continuity in space. It's not Darth Vader, although it kind of looks like Darth Vader.
It's good futurism, right?
It's futurism, yeah. And so that sculpture had been sort of locked into that narrative aspect right up into the end of the 19th century with Rodin. And so when the 20th century opens, you start to see innovation with sculpture as much as you do with painting. This is the work that remains unfinished, but it's the one that Rodin was probably most famous for elements of it. You can see that he has included his Thinker, which is one of his most famous pieces. This is The Gates of Hell, and it's based on a depiction of Dante's Inferno. So there are various characters from Dante's Inferno in it, and it was commissioned for the Museum of Decorative Arts. And as I said, he never finished it, but it was an area, again, where there were many sort of innovative elements in sculpture that spoke to the future. I mean, for example, the idea of the thinker doesn't have an identity. Even still, it's like, is it meant to be Dante himself, or what's the whole point of it? So, very important sculptor, the end of the century. So, as the 19th century came to an end, we see a period marked by enormous developments in technology that would change the world forever. The telegraph, and soon the radio, the telephone, the automobile, the airplane. These were realities by the first decade of the 20th century. And in the context of these advances, Western European public felt a sense of optimism and faith in the powers of progress. The idea that technology would bring a better life. This continues, this sense of optimism continues up until World War I. And then there is a huge backlash because people living in Europe experience mass destruction, automated destruction of huge numbers of people within the space of a few years. And it's the product of industry, and that's when artists will begin to comment on that and critique it and so on. But for this beginning part, up until the First World War, there's a tremendous sense of optimism about technology and industry. And we've seen the art style that kind of defines this moment in time, Art Nouveau, which is very much a part of the architecture and the design of the period. In France, Émile Gallé is an important figure. But we also see it as a movement that spreads throughout Europe. In Spain, they call it Modernisme. In Germany, the Jugendstil. In Italy, the Stile Floreale. In Austria and Germany, the Secession style. So let's have a look at a few variations on Art Nouveau. In Belgium, Art Nouveau is very close to the French style. This is Victor Horta's architectural design for a staircase in the Castle residence in Belgium. And you can see the same kind of organic, stylized lines that are suggestive of natural forms. This column, for example, appears to be almost like the stem of a plant and the plant opening up at the top. But the application is interesting because it's to everything. Just like we saw with the smoking room, we've got a kind of mosaic tile pattern on here. We've got the design on the wall. We have it in metal for the railing of the staircase, and then for the column as well. And also using industrial materials, different kinds of metal and so on to produce the effect. In Spain, Modernisme is largely evident in Barcelona in the realm of architecture. And if you go to Barcelona, you have to go and see the buildings designed by Antoni Gaudi. He is an amazing architect. He rejected historical styles and the eclectic combination of these styles in favor of a completely new style based exclusively in nature and the imagination. This is his Casa Batlló, which was an apartment building in Barcelona that he totally remodeled. So it was an existing apartment building and he remodeled it. And you can see it looks like nothing that you've seen before. You've got these gorgeous kind of undulating lines all through it. Everything is sort of curvilinear. He's using really interesting materials too. We've got a ton of mosaic tiles that are decorating the surface of the facade. It's hard to see the roof, but the roof is also undulating. It looks like parts of it are almost kind of melting or are bending. And it's not a coincidence, I think, that Salvador Dali, and if you're familiar with his work, the surrealist, he has a lot of melting clocks and things. He was born very near to Barcelona and would have been totally familiar with Gaudi's very revolutionary style. And here's a close-up. You can see these take on, even more than an organic quality, but there's something almost a bit monstrous. These look sort of mask-like, these balconies. And then these columns, they almost look like bones. And then we have the stained glass as well that's incorporated. So lots of beautiful and engaging aspects. This is probably Gaudi's greatest work, the Sagrada Familia, which started out as a Gothic church that was being built, a neo-Gothic church. And Gaudi took over from the initial architect, and then he just began to go absolutely crazy. And it is a project that obsessed him his entire life until he was killed by a streetcar when he was 74 years old. I think it was 1926. And the project even continued after his death, and it's not quite finished even yet. So if you go, you'll see cranes and things there. It's a project that's still ongoing, and it's become such an amazing thing that many stonemasons in Spain, the year before they retire, they will donate that year of their time to working on Sagrada Familia, which means the sacred family. There's all kinds of symbolism associated with the number of towers representing the four evangelists and aspects related to Christ. But it's just this fantastical, living, almost science fiction-like work that is just so compelling. here are some of the designs, and you can't really see it when you get the shot from far away, but close up you'll see incorporated into it all these bright, gorgeous ceramic forms, very, very colorful, and again, kind of surreal. Here are some more, and on the right is, you're standing on the interior, and again, it has this incredible organic quality. As you look up at the ceiling, it looks like it's being held up by these giant bones. Beautiful use of stained glass and colors. Here's another view looking up inside. So again, if you go to Barcelona, it's worth the wait in line to go and see Sagrada Familia. Over in Scotland, much more simple, Japan-inspired version of Art Nouveau. This is Charles Rennie Mackintosh. It's the Willow Tea Room, and you can see it looks almost like mid-century modern a bit, except for the propensity for the stained glass playing a big role, and smooth, simple lines. And this is the doorway, which again, the idea of very stylized stained glass is important. And there are a number of symbolist groups also that are associated with Art Nouveau in this period. One of them it's an international group known as the Rose and Cross, the Rose et Croix, a symbolist group that takes almost as its major theme the idea of sexuality. And it's very Freudian, the sense of of sex being one of the primary drives, but the idea of the problems that it can cause, the fear, the anxiety around it. And so this is a work by Ferdinand Knopf, a Belgian artist. It's called Caresses. And he uses the naturalist style, but the theme is just very, very strange. On one level, it's the story of the Sphinx and Oedipus, who is one of the travelers going by the Sphinx, and the Sphinx always asks these travelers this riddle to see if they can solve it, and nobody ever could until it came to Oedipus. The riddle is, which creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? And the answer is man, 4 legs as a baby crawling, 2 legs as an adult walking, and then 3 legs is with a cane in the evening, so at the end of your life. And so if you can't answer, the Sphinx throws you off a cliff, but Oedipus managed to answer. But this doesn't look like it speaks to the riddle at all. It speaks more to the Oedipus complex, mother love, that Sigmund Freud identified. And there's the Sphinx is this strange female creature who's sort of caressing Oedipus, who's seducing him, and there's just this really intriguing dynamic that's going on, presented in this very compelling way. So again, the imagination, the subconscious, even dreams are an aspect of this. This one by Jean Delville, Treasures of Satan. So taking this kind of theme, biblical theme, but really running with it and presenting it in this highly imaginative way, where we're in this underwater environment, and all of these erotic, nude forms are sort of piled together as this gorgeous satanic creature presides over top of them. And again, it's like we saw with Gustave Moreau, this almost obsessive attention to detail, which makes it almost like a kind of hypnotic environment. So much more than just storytelling, but resonating with this kind of poetic meaning. The other side of the coin, there were artists who were very disillusioned with what was going on at the end of the century. And one of them was the Belgian artist James Ensor, and this is probably his most famous work, called The Entry of Christ into Brussels, 1888. And what he was doing here was imagining what would happen if Jesus came into Brussels in modern day times. There's the biblical story of Jesus entering Jerusalem on a donkey and people laying palm fronds in front of him. But this is what Ensor said would happen in a modern consumer capitalist society obsessed with material values. Here's Jesus on the donkey with the halo, and it would erupt into this kind of crazy carnival atmosphere. You've got a marching band leading the way, you've got crowds, you've got people selling things, politicians are here on a stage waiting to probably present him with the keys to the city. You've got political banners, people trying to sell their ideas. And the way in which he's painted it is very strident colors, pure out of the tube. It's a lot like Van Gogh, for example, very expressionistic. And his people look like they are lacking souls. They're like masks. They are almost inhuman. And interestingly, his mother ran a mask store. He grew up above a mask store in the Belgian resort town of Ostende, and people would come and buy these masks at carnival time. And so he saw all these tourists, drunken British tourists for the most part, who would be in his little seaside town just acting like maniacs with their masks on during carnival. And this is his sort of really negative conception of humanity. It was considered so incendiary that it actually was not publicly exhibited until 1929. So again, you've these kind of two qualities going on, this luxurious, excessive beauty, and then this really virulent critique of society. In Austria, a counterpart to what James Ensor was part of the group of 20, and a counterpart to that in Austria was the Vienna Secession. So these are all part of the sort of the Art Nouveau groups and symbolist groups. The Vienna Secession was a group of 19 artists. They were painters, designers, and architects who broke away from the core association of Viennese artists. And the most prominent figure was Gustav Klimt. And Klimt was this larger-than-life artist who was really a rebel, who painted in a way that could be excruciatingly beautiful. All the socialites of Vienna wanted him to do their portraits. But he was also painted in a way that was considered to be unacceptable by the standard conservative society. So this is one of the first works that he did that created an absolute scandal. This is for Vienna University. The entrance ceiling